Kathy get involved in this?
Because she volunteers with the Library Association of Warren County, and we're doing it with them.
Okay. So is it a government grant kind of thing?
Actually, I don't believe it's a grant or anything. It's just from the Library of Congress. They're trying to, of course, document veteran stories.
Interesting.
All right, we're recording now.
Oh, we are?
So whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
You guys can begin. If you want to talk, let's have your statement first, and when you're done, you may begin. Okay.
Well, I agreed to do this for only one reason. I think there's a lot of misconception about Vietnam and about America and the reason why we fight wars. And like many veterans, I seldom spoke about Vietnam. So I agreed to do this with the hope that it helps even one person understand why we did what we did, when we did it, and why we continue to do what we do.
Okay. When was it that you entered the service?
I entered September 1964, and I got out in February 1968.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I enlisted. I went to Officers Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island, and became an officer.
Did you enlist with friends?
No, a friend encouraged me to do it. I was going to try to be a flight officer or a Marine Corps, and he convinced me the Navy was the best way to go, so I went Navy.
How long were you in the service?
Well, I was in from September 64 to February 68.
Where all did you go throughout the war?
Well, I was in Newport, Rhode Island for Officers Candidate School, Newport, Rhode Island for Crypto and Communications School, Boston, Massachusetts to assist in a building a communications station. And then I was sent to Vietnam, and on the way I went to Long Beach, California, then Coronado, California, Pendleton, California, and then to Vietnam, and back to Little Creek, Virginia after Vietnam, and then I was let go.
What was your family's reaction when you enlisted?
Well, they were proud. It was a tough time, and frankly, my uncles were all Marine Corps. My father was Navy, so it kind of fit. They believed in what we were trying to do, so it was a very easy transition. It was difficult for my mother, but other than that, it's a no-brainer.
What was your attitude at the beginning of the war?
I thought we were there for the right reason, and I've been proven correct, even though if you listen to some people then and now, we were there for the wrong reasons. It's not true. Had we not gone to Vietnam, I can't imagine how many countries would be under communist reign today. As a matter of fact, and I'll leave this with you guys, there's a list of countries that would have, who threw out the communists, in addition to, for example, Indonesia threw the Soviets out because our commitment to Vietnam, and other countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, etc., Thailand have stayed free of communists because they're scared to death of what America might do. And contrary to popular belief, we didn't lose the war, which is something a lot of people think. We never lost the war. If anyone lost the war, the politicians lost the war for us, but we didn't lose the war. We never lost a battle. The South Vietnamese lost the war. We had an agreement to leave Vietnam. We left it several months before the fall of Saigon. But you don't read about that in the newspapers.
Did your opinion about the war change?
Not at all. Not at all. Not one iota.
What weapons were you equipped with?
Personally, I was equipped with a 45 and an AR-15, but our boats carried AR-15s or M16s, 50 caliber machine guns, 30 caliber machine guns, M79 grenade launchers. One of my chief petty officers carried a 38, and we carried lots of hand grenades on board the boats, and that was a deterrent. Every day we'd drop about a gross of hand grenades in the water around the ships and around the ship anchors to discourage anyone who thought they might want to hook a limpet mine on the chain or the chain for the anchor. Pardon me?
Which one was your favorite?
Guns?
Yeah.
I don't think I really had any favorites, but the M16 was a good weapon.
Is the Navy your favorite branch of
Yes, yes, I love the Navy. I think it's a great organization.
Did you consider any other branches?
Yes, as I said earlier, the Marine Corps would have been my second choice.
Have you heard of Agent Orange?
Yes,
Did you know anyone that was exposed to it?
yes, a lot of people.
Were you injured in the war?
No,
What was your rank?
I was a lieutenant junior grade. I became a lieutenant while I was in country.
Did you like your commander?
Well, my commander was not that close to me, so yeah, I liked him a lot. I didn't get to see him very often.
How was the food?
Better than you think, but not. It's better than hospital food. If you ate the Army food, it was awful, but the Navy food was pretty good. Not like home, but it was good.
What did you like most about the war?
I don't think I liked anything about the war, but I liked the guys I served with. Just knowing that if you did a good job, you could feel good about yourself. And I had terrific sailors working for me.
Well, on the contrary, what did you like the least about it?
The fact that we had to fight it, but you know, that was our duty. We were sworn to do what we were told to do, and we went and did it.
Did the media effectively express the conditions of the war?
No, not at all, and they still don't today.
How did they express it?
Well, I think they took a lot of the, if you remember the picture of the young lady who got hit by napalm, and she was running down the road, literally charred. That wasn't done by Americans, that was done by South Vietnamese pilots. They did that, but we got blamed for it. And all you ever received information-wise here was negative information. You never really received the positive. So no, I think the news media did us a terrific disservice then, and I think they do a terrific disservice to us now.
How were you treated when you returned home?
It wasn't fun. They took our personal weapons from us in Seattle, Washington, and we flew then to Chicago. And in Chicago, they told us that we would be better off to change out of a uniform into civilian clothes. And in Chicago, there was, excuse me, a whole group of people, including elderly people, who were picketing and throwing things and yelling stupid things. The stupid people doing stupid stuff.
Are you in the VFW?
Yes.
Have you been to any reunions?
Not really. I get together with some of the sailors when they come to town. I was just with one last week, and then but I'm probably going to start going. But up to this point, no, I have not.
Did the Navy prepare you for any jobs?
Yeah, I think it did. It did for a lot of our guys. Again, if you look at the facts that you read in the papers about the guys who were in Vietnam, you'd think they were a bunch of bums. The fact of the matter is, there are fewer veterans by far who ever got in trouble, went to prison than served in Vietnam. The average income's better. The types of jobs that they had were better. There were few of them ever unemployed compared to other people. So the facts were completely distorted about the Vietnam veterans. And I have an article here that I'll leave with your teachers so that you can, if you're interested, you can take a read at it. It'll really open your eyes to some interesting facts.
If you had one chance to do it all over again, would you, and why?
Absolutely, because it was the right thing to do. And I came back alive.
That's all I got.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hines.
Okay.
Got new shoes, so they squeak a lot. So you worked with the PBRs?
No, I
you
did
didn't work
not.
with the PBRs?
No.
Okay.
No.
So what was your exact role in the Navy?
Well, I was the officer in charge of these boats, and they were 45-foot picket boats, 36-foot LCPLs and 15-foot Boston Whalers. Our job was to stop all junk or sampan traffic coming in and out of the harbor and inspect them to make sure that they weren't infiltrating or bringing weapons or ammunition or anything like that. At the same time, it was our job to protect the ships at anchor while they were unloading material and to protect those power ships. So we were 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on patrol. There was, I think, out of 10 days, I think our guys got 1 day off. But they were at war. It wasn't a vacation they were on, even though we were on a beach and a beautiful sea, etc.
So what harbor were you working in?
Cameron Bay.
Cameron Bay.
Which was.
What would the Viet Cong do or try to do to the ships you were protecting? What was there?
Well, the amount of problems we had were minimal. We had the largest tonnage output in terms of ships coming in and offloading, but we had the fewest problems as well. Our guys were very diligent, and so you really never know how many people tried. There was only one successful hit on one of the ships, and that was after I left. But they would come in, they called them separate teams. They would come in and try to put mines on the anchor chains of the ships at anchor or on the sides of the ships. And of course we had the ammunition piers and the fuel piers for the Army. And then further north was the Air Force Base. Now we did nothing for the Air Force Base except keep junks and things from landing up on that side of it. But they had their own perimeter there.
So can you kind of walk us through a typical day on your patrols?
Understand now, it was my guys who were on patrol most of the time. I would go out periodically on one boat or the other 24 hours a day whenever I felt like I think they needed me out there. So I wasn't out there all the time. But a typical day for one of my sailors,
okay.
Up before daylight, breakfast and muster, and my chief petty officer or I would have the word of the day and tell them what was going on and if there's any information they needed to know. And then they were off to their duties. And some had engine repairs or ammo guys, weapons, and the patrols that had to go out on patrol. So they would go out and meet the boats coming in and they would transfer information, etc. They would be out there for 12 hours. Meanwhile, we would bring food out to them, sandwiches or that have good old Army mid-rats. But they were out there for 12 hours at a time. When they came in, they were debriefed. They were then free to go to the little bar we had for beers and then hit the rack because in 12 more hours they were going back out again. And that went on for 10 hours or 10-day cycle.
Now, when you were doing these patrols in the harbor, how often did you come across people trying to bring in contraband? Again,
it'd probably be no different than going out on Route 95 now and stopping people to try to find drugs in the car. You'd literally find more American food, cigarettes, and things like that, which you would just not pay much attention to because you don't know how they got them, unless they had cases of them. And then in that case, they were probably stolen, so my guys would take them. It was a rare thing to catch someone actually with ammunition and weapons. Really rare. Did that mean they threw them overboard? Absolutely. Did that mean they didn't have them? Absolutely not. But it was also rare to see young men on these boats. They were typically elderly men and women. You rarely saw young guys.
Did it raise your suspicion when you did see a young man on those boats?
Yeah, absolutely. But we also carried, we called them white mice. We'd have an interpreter with us. And they were either part of the Vietnamese Navy or the Vietnamese Army. And they would interrogate these guys in not such a nice fashion. So it was interesting. We stayed out of that by law and by military law. And there were several situations there where we turned them over to the military police, the Vietnamese military police.
Okay. Well, my father served in Vietnam, and he said, especially when I was growing, I was born in 1970. When he returned, and I guess he returned in the end of '68. He said that it took America probably 10 years to really understand or kind of get the stigma of what went on over there away. And even till this day, as you said already, that there's still this stigma of Vietnam veterans being bums, being crazy, being homeless. How do you react when people say that to you? How does that make you feel?
Well, it's a sad commentary, but it proves that people are frankly very shallow. I mean, it's no different than what's going on today. I don't have a lot of patience for that kind of conversation, so I avoid it. But I also don't have a lot of patience with the bravado. I don't hang out at the VFW, or even though I belong, because you may not know this, and your father may not know this, and I really didn't realize it, but there was only 2.7 million guys in the military during the Vietnam War. And yet I think the number was, if I can find it, there are millions who claimed to have been in Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
What's that tell us? That tells us they're wannabes. And that was a pretty phenomenal number when I got this report. And I guess they found it out through the census. But I mean, literally hundreds of thousands of people, like 13 or 14 million people claim to have been a Vietnam vet, which is just impossible.
Yeah.
And then what's that tell us? It tells us that the Vietnam vets, like most of our military, are well respected by those people that you really care about respecting you, and that there are a lot of people who wish they had done it but didn't do it.
Now, looking back at the sailors you served with, you probably served with a vast majority of enlisted men. Am I correct?
All enlisted guys.
So, as enlisted men, looking back, and you're an officer, you went to college, you got commissioned. Looking at these guys who are enlisted, were most of them draftees, or did most of them enlist themselves?
I would say that I really don't know the number, but maybe 20–25% were draftees. Okay. I just had this conversation not long ago with one of my enlisted guys who I haven't seen since 1967. And he remembers the day we brought him in October of '67, and I put him through about a 4-hour nonstop educational process. And these guys were 16 to 18 years old. And the last thing I said to him, you guys who are striking to be gunner's mates, you make sure before you touch a weapon you unload it, to make sure that you don't start cleaning a weapon that's loaded. And 24 hours later, he blew the window out of one of our boats, and he reminded me of it. And I'd forgotten all about it, frankly. But I had, I'm going to say 10% of my guys had some college. I had no one who had finished college. I had a dozen that I know were going back to college. I had a lot of career sailors. And the group that's part of the alumni, if you want to call them that, of the Inshore Undersea Warfare Group, they're still today a gung-ho bunch of guys. I mean, frankly, they all have beards, and I don't look good amongst them, but they all have beards and shaggy hair and smoke cigarettes and drink beer, and they're just great guys. But they all were successful in their work, and most of them were technical, and they learned that over there because they were all young guys coming in. My chief petty officer, he was my in-between guy. He was terrific, and he no nonsense. And so when we got inspected by the book I showed you, the inspection from our commanders out of the U.S. out of Long Beach, head and shoulders our guys were above the rest of the guys. Our boats were painted, everything shined, and that's because they did it every day. And we pulled every boat out of the water once a week. Engines, these engines were constantly being worked on. And because of that, we rarely had breakdowns. Our boats were always on patrol. The areas were always covered. And the guys, frankly, didn't have to work 11 days out of 10 because the rotation was there and the boats were running. So they got their normal rest, if you will. Terrific guys, though, really.
Thinking back, is there anything that kind of sticks out in your mind of a more like a hair-raising experience or anything that was kind of noteworthy?
I don't think I want to talk about any of that kind of stuff,
Okay.
but not many.
All right.
You'd be surprised at how many guys that served in Vietnam never heard a gunshot.
Mm-hmm.
You heard bombs going off and things
Yeah.
like that, but
Were there any other times that are kind of stand on your mind? You talked about a person trying to be a gunner, maybe blowing the window out. Anything else that was kind of humorous like that happened?
yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. One of my commanders decided that he wanted to go on patrol in an exercise that was being held by the Vietnamese Navy, and we had to take him in on an island called Bim Ba Island, and they thought there were a bunch of infiltrators there. We didn't believe it, but because it meant that we had leaks, and so we said, fine, I'll give you sailors to go with you. We'll take you over, we'll drop you off. And they were going to chase everybody from one end of the island to the other. So my commander decided we're going to take a 15-foot Boston Whaler with an 80-horsepower engine out into the open sea, and we're going on the seaside. Anyone that comes over the top of that thing, we'll be there to get them. I says, Commander, this is really nuts. Well, we'll take a few boats. No, my guys aren't going out there. And this was right before sunset. So it was like they didn't like to do anything at night. And so we were out there, and probably 3 or 4 foot seas. We had one flashlight. We had no running lights. We had 2 AR-15s. Thank God they were clipped onto the side of the boat, and one flashlight. And we were in radio contact. So we saw them come over the top of the hill, and they were being chased. We thought they were being chased because we were a couple hundred yards away. And he said, should we open fire? I said, you don't even know who's there. I said, just relax. So I said, just forget about what you're seeing, and let's just wait and let these guys do their job. Turns out they were literally chasing themselves. So there was nothing there. But meanwhile, he had to go to the bathroom. So the boat's rocking. The tide's starting to come in. I said, well, there's no place to go, Commander, so side of the boat. And when he did that, he stood up, the flashlight fell out, hit the side of the boat, went into the water, into the depth. Now we have no lights, and the sun's going down, and the tide's coming in. We got to get out of here. And so we pulled out into the open sea, and the seas immediately were 10 to 12 foot high. They were higher than the length of the boat in some cases. So we sailed, literally sailed into the harbor. And so now we're safe, and he's hanging on for dear life. And he said, now what are we going to do? I said, well, we're going to go with these guys and listen to their debriefing. He said, well, what's that big boat over there? I said, that's a honeymoon boat. Well, how do we know someone's not on that boat? I said, because it's a honeymoon boat. And it's kind of like you don't mess with it. Well, but isn't it a young guy? I says, of course it is. He said, well, I think we ought to go take a look. I said, I'll tell you what, Commander. Get your flak jacket on, we'll pull over, and you get on and do whatever you want. But I'm not doing it. So we went over and tied up next to the boat. He beat the daylights out of the boat, getting on, fell down, and there was a honeymoon couple in there. So he checked their IDs, et cetera, and I said, you satisfied? No, you got to write this stuff down. I said, well, then you write it down. Meanwhile, we're in 3 or 4 foot seas still. So he got back in the boat, and that was the end of the story. But I didn't get any black marks for that. He didn't want me to tell anybody what happened. So it's pretty funny, though. I've told that story a lot.
That was good. Upon your return, you were saying in Chicago you ran into some problems.
Yeah.
But when you got back home, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
But I flew back to Boston.
Okay.
I was getting married 19 days after I got back because I promised I would do so. And I confirmed it in August, and meanwhile the family had they had all the plans made, so I came back to do what I did. And unfortunately, Boston was a hotbed of anti-Vietnam. So it was kind of interesting. Even at our wedding, I had several officers, including a former commander, show up at my wedding. It was interesting, to say the least. But nothing was ever said. They claim I didn't enjoy myself at my wedding. I sat at the bar with some relatives of hers, but I don't really remember it, frankly.
Well, did you? Well, after you got out, when did your commission end?
Commission never ended. February the 5th, '68.
Okay.
I was released, but I was still reserve.
Okay. Did you when you kind of returned to civilian life? When somebody found out that you were in the Navy, Did they take? What was the kind of attitude they took towards you?
They were always cautious, which actually worked an advantage. I was a salesman for a steel company in Connecticut, so people were generally nice, but they were not necessarily pro-Vietnam or us being there. I mean, that was an issue, but no one ever. We still on tape.
Yeah.
Oh. I was at a movie theater one night, and there was two movies on. I'll never forget it. It was Patton and MASH. And MASH was on first, and I was sitting on the right side of the theater, and a guy was sitting on the left side of the theater. This wee little town theater, and we were both upset with MASH. The original MASH was really anti-war, and this was being played in a little New England town, and I just thought it was awful. So I'm booing it, and he's booing it. And then Patton came on, and we went nuts. Of course, the rest of this people in the theater really weren't happy with us, and either was my new wife or his wife. A couple of weeks later, we're at a cocktail party, and it was called The Newcomers, and my wife, put us in this thing, and we're standing around talking to people and drinking a cocktail, and someone said something about, have you been up to the theater to see these movies? And I turned around and said, yes, we just did it Saturday a few weeks ago. Someone said, yeah, there was two nuts in that theater. And I says, well, I was one of them. And the guy standing over here next to me, he turned out to be one of my best friends and a lawyer. He says, and I was the other one. And he was in the Army, he was up in I Corps. And anyway, we became very good friends and still friends today over movie theater. Huh? Funny stuff.
Let me check the tape real quick.
Okay.
Make sure everything's on it.
You learn anything?
Oh, it's so great for the students and, it's just everyone's experiences, because we all get to, remember, of course, that so many people have so many other experiences.
You done?
If you have pictures and stuff, if you want to show some stuff off, I'm going to zoom in on it, and you can talk about it for a second.
How are you going to zoom in? I don't know what you want to say, really.
It's up to you. I mean, it's completely up to you. So I'm going to kind of do this.
And these are, frankly, all Defense Department pictures.
And you can show yourself at a young age.
No, I don't want to see myself. I don't want to be seen. Well, here, I'll just show you. Here's a couple pictures of the boat. And these are both the 36-foot LTPLs with twin 50s mounted fore and aft. These are all World War II boats, by the way. Brought out of mothballs, and the Greek cleaned off, and we launched them. There's another one there. This shows us approaching a junk with 3 fishermen on. 2 young kids and an old man. Never any young men on them. There's an interesting picture. I don't know why it's even in there. This is a refugee camp off of that island I was just talking about. These are all from Quang Tri province. And there were some nasty characters in there. I don't know whether you're getting this or not.
Yeah, I'm good.
Are you? There's the boats at the piers. I don't know whether any of this is. There's one of the picket boats underway.
Are those, you said those are Department of Defense photographs?
These are here, yes.
Those are
These big
nice.
ones.
That's good.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're staged photos. These are. There's nobody out there doing that. This picture here, well, there's one of the pictures. I think it's this one here. Is up at the SEAL Museum,
Okay.
and the same one of the boats is up there as well. We were not SEALs, by the way.
Yeah.
We did some of the things they did, but not what they did. In fact, they did a terrific job yesterday, didn't they?
Yeah, it was amazing, huh?
I think it was great. I think that's all. You know.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Well, no, it's just that I just hope, I'm not sure where it's all going, but hopefully Tyler got something out of this, and you don't feel like that the guys that are in the service are a bunch of grunge bags, because they're not. And if it wasn't for, even though we take a lot of criticism even today, it's amazing how many people still want to come to this country. And it's amazing how they copy us. So military is a good thing.
Definitely.
All right, so I'm going to stop the recording.
That's
and
fine.
then I'm going to ask you some stuff.
What I'll do, Tyler, is leave this with him, and he can make copies of it, and he can mail it to me.